I live and ride my Moto Guzzi V7 in Oklahoma, where lane splitting and lane filtering are not legal. And it's really hot in Oklahoma in the summertime, always in the 90s, very often over 100 degrees. And that's pretty hot to be sitting in traffic wearing all my gear, waiting for the light to change. I used to live in Los Angeles, where both lane splitting and lane filtering are perfectly legal, and so I'm often tempted to do it in Oklahoma. But I know that if I do and a cop sees me, I'm going to get a ticket. And you know what? That's stupid, because lane splitting and lane filtering should be legal in all states. Let's get into that. What's the difference between lane splitting and lane filtering? Well, lane splitting is when you are riding between the cars and those cars are moving. Lane filtering is when the cars are stopped, such as at a traffic light, and you are moving between the cars to get up to the front of the line. Why isn't lane splitting and lane filtering legal in most states? Is it because it's dangerous? Is it because lawmakers think that those practices will give motorcyclists an unfair advantage? Actually, neither of those things is true. Lane splitting and lane filtering is actually safer for motorcyclists, and it eases traffic congestion for everybody. So where is lane splitting and lane filtering legal? Only in 6 of the 50 states. California is the model for that, where it's been perfectly legal since 2016, when a new section was added to the California Vehicle Code, but of course motorcyclists were lane splitting and filtering in California long before that. They just legalized it in 2016. And according to California Highway Patrol guidelines, lane splitting should be done only when traffic is moving at 30 miles per hour or slower, and the motorcyclist should be moving no quicker than 10 to 15 miles per hour faster than the surrounding traffic. Minnesota is the most recent state to legalize the practice. A new law went into effect in Minnesota on July 1st, 2025.
Both lane splitting and lane filtering are about to become legal in Minnesota, at least under certain conditions.
Allows lane splitting up to 25 miles per hour and lane filtering at speeds of up to 15 miles per hour. In Utah, lane splitting is not allowed, but lane filtering is allowed. Lane filtering is allowed where the posted speed limit is 45 miles per hour or slower, and riders filtering must not go faster than 15 miles per hour. The practice is not legal on highways or on on-ramps to the highways, but curiously, you can filter on the off-ramp from the highway. Arizona has allowed lane filtering since 2022. The rules are the same as in Utah, only where the posted speed limit is 45 miles per hour or slower, and the riders must be moving at no faster than 15 miles per hour. But lane splitting is expressly not allowed in Arizona. In fact, a new law was passed June 22nd of 2026, and it takes effect in September of 2026, that makes lane splitting not only illegal, but not just a traffic citation, it is now a criminal misdemeanor. So, warning to riders in Arizona, you can filter, but do not lane split. Since 2021, Montana has also allowed filtering in slow speed conditions, meaning that the traffic is moving not faster than 10 miles per hour, and the rider passing between the cars must not move faster than 20 miles per hour. The law in Hawaii is somewhat confused on the internet. I have seen a number of websites that say that lane splitting and lane filtering are not allowed in Hawaii, but that driving on the shoulder is allowed, what these websites have referred to as shoulder surfing. But in fact, that's not true. I looked it up. A 2019 law was passed in Hawaii, allowing the Hawaii Department of Transportation to designate in certain areas places where motorcyclists could ride on the shoulder, but it never allowed at-will riding on the shoulder, and in any event, that law expired at the end of 2020. So in Hawaii, lane splitting, lane filtering, riding on the shoulder, all of that, absolutely illegal. So what are the laws in other states? Well, Massachusetts is a good example. Massachusetts requires drivers and riders to stay within their designated lane and not to flip around between lanes in an unsafe manner. And of course, lane splitting involves riding between the lanes, so that of course would be illegal under that law. And most other states have similar laws requiring vehicles to stay within their designated lanes, so lane splitting and lane filtering not allowed. Are lane splitting and lane filtering dangerous? Do they impede traffic flow? No. In fact, the opposite is true. Both practices are much safer for motorcyclists, and according to the official Utah State website, which is called ridetolive.utah.gov, and I quote, "Lane filtering cuts down on congestion at busy traffic lights. It also helps eliminate crashes from motorists hitting a motorcycle while stopped at a red light." Several sources have cited studies which say that lane splitting and lane filtering are good, that they free up congested space, that they help prevent motorcyclists from being rear-ended in congested conditions, that they allow traffic jams to clear more quickly because the motorcyclists get out of the way, allowing the cars to move along, that it also helps motorcycles not overheat by sitting in traffic, and likewise reduces emissions from motorcycles not sitting in traffic, which is good for the environment. But what are these studies that all of these sources are citing? Well, there are three. In May 2015, the University of California at Berkeley released a study about lane splitting and safety in California. And not only did that study find that lane splitting allowed motorcyclists to be much safer in traffic, it also found significant differences between riders who did lane split and those who didn't. Compared with other motorcyclists, lane splitting motorcyclists were more often riding on weekdays and during commute hours, were using better helmets, were traveling at lower speeds, and were less likely to have been using alcohol and also less likely to be carrying a passenger. In other words, lane-splitting motorcyclists were regular riders, riders who were using their motorcycles as daily transportation, not riders who were weekend warriors or party animals out for a run after hitting the bar. With regard to injuries, the California report looked at 5,969 collisions involving motorcycles and found that 997 of those motorcyclists were lane splitting at the time of the collision. However, lane splitting riders were much less likely to suffer severe injuries to their head, to their torso, to their extremities, or to be involved in fatal accidents. Finally, the study showed that lane-splitting riders were much less likely to be rear-ended than other motorcyclists who were not lane-splitting. Another interesting aspect of the UC Berkeley report is that it found that lane-splitting riders were much more likely to be wearing better helmets. And of course, many studies have shown that not wearing a helmet leads to significantly greater injury or death than in motorcycle accidents than when riders are wearing helmets. The California study found that non-lane splitting riders were much more likely to be wearing a half helmet, a three-quarter open face helmet, or what the report referred to as a novelty helmet. I suppose think World War I bucket-style helmet. Whereas lane-splitting riders, 81% of them were wearing full-face helmets. Again, indicating that these are more serious riders, that they are using their motorcycles daily for daily transportation, for commuting, and not just for fun on the weekend or rolling around after having a few beers. There's another report by the Washington State Traffic Safety Commission which actually says that lane splitting leads to more accidents. But in fact, the Washington State Traffic Safety Commission did not conduct its own study. Instead, it relied on surveys of motorcyclists and on a study out of France which involved only 11 motorcyclists who were monitored while driving in certain urban areas of Paris. The Washington State Traffic Safety Commission said that French study found that lane-splitting motorcyclists were 4 times more likely to be involved in traffic accidents. But in fact, I've read that French study, and it says nothing about how many more accidents involve lane-splitting motorcyclists. All that French study, in fact, says is that the motorcyclists spent about 75% of their time riding through Paris lane-splitting. But it didn't say anything about how often they were involved in accidents. Moreover, that French study is really not reliable in its statistics because it noted that according to French police reports, only 5% of lane-splitting motorcyclists were involved in accidents, but also cited a French insurance company which said that up to 60% of collisions involving motorcyclists occurred because of lane splitting. Well, this is a pretty wide disparity in statistics, and as a result, I don't think we can trust that French report at all, especially since we can't expect that the French insurance company is going to be unbiased in its calculation of how many accidents involve motorcyclists and what caused them. So as a result, I also think we cannot rely on the Washington State Traffic Safety Commission report because it's based on flawed information. The third and final report is out of Australia, and it, again, was a limited report. It involved just an 8-week study of allowing lane filtering, not lane splitting, just lane filtering, only in the central business district of Sydney. And the sole purpose of that study was simply to find if traffic congestion was eased by lane filtering. Because it was a short study and because not many motorcycles were involved, the report was actually inconclusive on whether traffic congestion was eased, but the report did say, and I quote, "Common sense says that removing some motorcycles from traffic queues may help to minimize queuing at busy intersections." Well, certainly. So really the only comprehensive study is that one from UC Berkeley, which clearly finds that lane splitting and lane filtering greatly improve safety for motorcyclists. And in view of that, it's hard to understand why all states don't legalize lane splitting and lane filtering. After all, shouldn't all states be interested in enhancing motorcycle safety? So as riders, if we live in a place where lane splitting and lane filtering is not legal, what can we do? Well, we must ride defensively, of course. We all know that motorcyclists are invisible, car drivers simply do not see us, so it's up to us to watch them. Watch out for those cars that are pulling out from the side, that are changing lanes in front of us, that are turning left in front of us, or that are running that red light. We must drive knowing that they don't see us. In states where lane splitting and filtering is allowed, we still have to ride defensively because we have to be looking out for those car drivers in the line that are talking with passengers, that are playing with their phones, that are not paying attention and might suddenly change lanes in front of us. A New York Times article that came out on June 22, 2026 is very important because it talks about not lane splitting and lane filtering, but about the increasing size of pickup trucks and SUVs in the United States, and notes that the flat front of most pickup trucks and SUVs can be up to 48 inches high. The problem with this is that it causes more pedestrian accidents and fatalities because of the blind spot of that great big front on the pickup truck and the SUV. It's an enormous blind spot. And the New York Times article also noted that if a car hood is sloped and hits a pedestrian, the pedestrian will be knocked out of the way. But if we have a flat front, like on pickup trucks and SUVs, and hit a pedestrian, that pedestrian is going to be sucked under that vehicle and much more likely to be killed. Now, these same blind spots affect motorcyclists as well. That's why this is an important article for us to know about. Those big pickup trucks and SUVs are not seeing us any more than they are seeing the pedestrians. The blind spot is also made worse because of what they call the A-pillar. That's the big metal thing that supports the roof on the left-hand side of the driver, and those are getting bigger and cause blind spots in that position as well. In fact, the New York Times article notes that the increasing size of these vehicles has caused an increase of 400 annual pedestrian deaths in the United States. And this is unique to the United States. This doesn't happen in other countries. But of course, other countries don't have the same size vehicles that we have here. They tend to drive much smaller cars and much smaller trucks. So where does that leave us? The California study clearly shows that lane splitting and lane filtering enhance safety for motorcycles. The Australia study indicates that lane filtering improves traffic congestion. It appears that the only reason that more states don't legalize lane splitting and lane filtering is either ignorance or reliance on bad data, like that Washington State Traffic Safety Commission report. As motorcyclists living in states where lane splitting and filtering is not allowed, we should urge our lawmakers to legalize it, because that will improve safety for motorcyclists, improve traffic congestion for everyone. In the meantime, use your own best judgment on whether or not to do it. If you live in a state where splitting and filtering is not allowed, you probably shouldn't do it, especially if you're in Arizona where it's actually a criminal misdemeanor. If you live in a state where lane splitting and filtering is allowed, do it responsibly. Don't ride too fast, and if the traffic around you is beginning to move at a rapid pace, get back in the lane. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Please hit that subscribe button, give the video a like if you liked it, and I will see you in the next one.